Hi, this is Tony Coviello with Iron Engineering. I'm the Chief Structural Engineer and the Structural Engineer for this project alongside Emily Woodman, one of my engineers. We can be reached at 603-766-0435. We did this short audio clip here for you today because this is such a unique framing condition, and we thought it might help to verbalize some of our intention here. First of all, there's a lot of load coming down on these two headers in this elevation. And so you'll see the headers are quite large. We're talking three 14-inch deep 10 gauge headers, and the three members are 2 inches wide. So 14 inches tall, 2 inches wide, 10 gauge material, and it's three of them packed together in each of the H17 headers. They're capped with a 6-inch, inch and a quarter flange track, 16 gauge top and bottom. Now, we recognize that these 2-inch wide studs sections, sometimes those lip returns can flare a little bit, so it'll be difficult to get this may be difficult to get the cap tracks on this header, but it really, they need to have the cap tracks. The material needs to be unpunched, and no splicing. So the full width of the OP61 opening, those have to be, continuous tracks and stud members. Do not splice any of them. The headers, a very unique condition is that we need web stiffeners inside the header. So each stud section of the built-up assembly needs to have a web stiffener at each end. So each H17 header is going to have 6 web stiffeners, 3 on each end. The entire elevation shown here will have 12 total. Pay attention to the way that those screws are orientated. You don't want to build a header in a manner that the screw tips are pointed outward towards the finished materials, either interior or exterior. You want them pointed inward. Obviously, it'd be a safety hazard if they would be pointed outward. But if they're pointed outward, I think that it would draw someone's. Someone might come and try to grind the screw tips off, and that would be inappropriate. We need to have 3 threads exposed on the other side of the surface. So try to make it so that the head of the screw is on the outside facing in. It's just going to take some, you might have to clamp the web stiffeners in place in order to make that happen. So that's the header. The headers is another unique condition here is we're actually bearing on jack studs as part of the jamb assembly. So the jamb assembly is 3 10 gauge 2-inch flange studs with a couple of pieces of track to meld those together. The jamb assembly has 2 jack studs, so the header's bearing on top of the 2 jacks with a single stud, extending a king post extending up to the deck or to the top track, where there's a clip to fasten that, detailed in the JT-1 detail. So the jack post, because it's a bearing condition, that's why we need the web stiffeners in the header. But the space we have for the interior double jamb is 12 inches, and the material we're using adds up. If you add up the width of just the stud materials, that's 12 inches. But as you see in the J22 jamb assembly, there's a couple tracks there in order to frame everything together. If you add up the width of those track thicknesses, you're going to get a thickness bigger than 12. And so if that creates a problem with the rough opening, you may have to adjust or shave down the wood bucks that are fastened to the face of the jambs in order to account for that depth. There's no space in that interior jamb to account for it otherwise. So we wanted to point that out. The last thing to point out is a sort of construction methodology thing. It's the way that these headers are attached to the king post is that there's a piece of track. If you look at detail 2 on this SK, on the upper right of detail 2, it calls out a 14-inch tall, 6-inch TSC 16. It's a 2-inch flange track, 16 gauge. It's being fastened to the king post with 6 number 12 screws. If you put that 14-inch tall piece of track in place prior to setting the header, then you probably won't have enough room to set the header because the slab above gets in its way. So my recommendation is, build the king stud, build the jack post, build the header on the ground, attach these track acceptance pieces to the face of the header on the ground, just with 1 screw, lift it in place, unscrew that screw that held this piece of track on, lift the header up, making sure that these 6-inch pieces of connector track stay in place. And so with the header lifted up, you can then fasten these pieces to the king post. Then you drop the header into place and fasten the flange of these 6-inch connectors to the face, each face of the 14-inch headers. So there's a timing and a kind of painting yourself in a corner situation here, where you're going to want to have these end connectors, tacked in place while you install the header, just momentarily, just so everything gives you space to work when you do it. So we hope this little audio clip is helpful for you in assembling this. If you have any questions, please give myself, Tony Coviello, or Emily Woodman a call in our office at 603-766-0435. Thank you very much.